Okay, we're back at the cycle class, everybody. We're going to talk today about there's 100% guarantee that you can recover from alcoholism and drug addiction. Okay, we're going to go over what it feels like to be stuck on this cycle of addiction, hopeless with seemingly no way out. And we're going to break down what that is and what the problem with that is. And then we're going to bring it to the solution to that problem, come out of the big book, out of Bill's story, where we can kind of go over Bill's experience with the solution, which is going through the steps, bringing our body around like-minded people, meetings and stuff, staying around accountability, and then the most important thing is working with somebody else who's still suffering, working with another alcoholic addict. And the best way that we've been given this spiritual kit of tools right here in the big book is to take other alcoholic addicts through the steps. And if you do those three things, you're working the steps, you're living out the steps. Part of that's living out the steps. One of the most important ones is step 11, that you have that morning prayer and meditation time with God. You're checking in with him just for that day. You're asking him to direct your thinking for the 24 hours. That means daily. And it says upon awakening on page 86. So every morning I wake up, when I wake up, which I usually wake up in the morning nowadays. I didn't stay up all night, or I don't wake up at 1 p.m. anymore. I wake up in the morning. I have things to do now for my life. And whether we're in treatment still, wherever we're at, we start practicing this and putting this into play, and we never stop doing it. That's the key. So upon awakening, I look to God and I say, Lord, I cannot live a day apart from you. And all that is I wasn't created to live apart from God. And a lot of things I'm finding out is I'm just realizing that I'm living in a way now that I was always intended to live. And the way I was living before, I was never intended to live that way. But God's grace on my life is what I couldn't get off this cycle. I had fun. It was thrilling for a while. But I look at that as a blessing because I couldn't maintain living this way that I was never intended to live. So anytime I go back to living, playing God and not looking to him every day, not surrendering my life to him, my will to him, not staying in the three parts, not staying around like-minded people or working with another alcoholic addict, I'm not living the way I was intended to live. So that's all I'm doing. I just realized the light bulb went off because I saw my life in this cycle, and maybe you'll see your life in this cycle. Here's Matt right here with a big old hole right in the middle of him. Not really understanding what's going on. Since birth, I had a self-centered outlook on life. I did whatever pleased Matt, In between there, did some kind acts, boosted my ego up. I always thought I was a pretty nice guy, nicer than most. But I was very self-centered, and I had a lot of fear in my life. So as time went on, I found a way to treat that spiritual condition. Of course, I didn't know how to have an intimate relationship with God, when that's the best way to treat that. The only way you're really going to fill that void is living in this close relationship with God. So by the time I was about 16, after having spiritual malady develop in my life, which is what? Estrangement from God. So I was estranged from God, and I had spiritual malady developing in my life. And so some of the symptoms of that is I felt restless, irritable, discontented, right? Feelings of uselessness, feelings of depression, anxiety. I can't tell you how many people I get calls from that are suffering from anxiety and depression and all these things. And even kids are being put on Ritalin and all these drugs. And then we become adults and we're feeling depressed and anxiety. We have no relationship with God. We're not living the way we were created to live. We're living for self, consumed with self, following the lies of the world, making this life all about us. And so we don't know how to treat that stuff. So we turn to pills and different things, busy with work, change girlfriend, sadly change wife, leave our family, all these things, when we come to find out there's a beautiful way to treat this internal condition, the spiritual malady that controlled my life. So when I was 16, guess what I found? Alcohol. Alcohol temporarily and in a counterfeit way finally treated the spiritual malady. My whole life, I knew something was off. super self-conscious, full of fear, because I was living for myself. I thought that was the only way to live. I didn't know any other way to live. I was brought to church, but it was never real to me. I never took action to spend time with God, to read my Bible, to serve others as a priority. None of that. So when the alcohol was put in me, it treated the spiritual malady finally. And I was comfortable in my own skin. And all of a sudden, the fear went away. I wasn't restless. I didn't feel irritable. I was content. I didn't feel discontented. I felt content. And I chased that feeling for a long, long time. And my life ended up being stuck on this cycle of addiction over and over and over and over, to where now the truth and consequences were happening in my life. I would emerge remorseful, make a firm resolution, but I could never stick to any of the promises I made. It would always turn into a broken promise. And I never understood why. Because after a while, the truth and consequences weren't fun, and they were heavy. I was losing everything good in my life. And then I would have the alcohol or the drugs out of my system, because I would go to my parents' house to detox and somehow stay there for 2, 3, 4 days, or I'd eventually started getting arrested. I'd get arrested. It'd be out of my system. I was there for like 4 or 5 days, mostly a week. I'd get released from jail, or I would try different programs. So while I was in the programs, I had the alcohol and the drugs out of my system, right? So why would I keep going back to something that was causing consequences in my life? Well, I didn't know what the solution was. I was sitting that broken promise for as long as I could, but the problem was I was coming apart at the seams. I was restless, irritable, and discontented. I was feeling depressed, anxiety, bored. I had boredom. I didn't know what to do with myself. So what I found out was my real problem is alcoholism. Alcoholism is my problem. It's not alcohol, it's not drugs. It's this threefold disease. The spiritual malady, the mind. My mind is sick. I have the mind of a chronic alcoholic addict. So what happens with me? My mind tells me that this time, the mental obsession is this time I put the alcohol and drugs in my body, I'm going to be able to control it and enjoy it. Although I have all this experience with facing truth and consequences. As soon as I go back drinking or using, I have all these consequences in my life. I lose everything. Have to emerge remorseful, if I get the chance to emerge remorseful, go back to making all these firm resolutions and broken promises. See, so my mind tells me a lie that I'm going to be able to control it and enjoy it like I see other people doing. The example the big book gives is, it's like I would keep touching a hot stove. Why would I put the alcohol back in my body when I know I'm going to get burnt by it? But there I am, putting alcohol back in my body. I wouldn't go touch that hot stove again. If I just got burnt by it, would I? All I had to do was stay away. If I didn't take the first drink or the first drug, then we wouldn't even be here talking right now. But for whatever reason, I can't seem to not take that first drink or do the first drug. Because part of my disease, I have this sick mind that tells me I'm going to control it and enjoy it like I see other people doing. And the body piece is something not everybody has. If I'm the real alcoholic, as the book says on page 20 and 21, that's why you have to qualify people when you come into the AA rooms. Are you the real alcoholic? Can you have enough truth and consequences in your life where you can emerge remorseful on the umpteenth time, whatever time that is, and you can actually stick to your firm resolution, and you can stay away from drugs and alcohol and have something good in your life? Or that would clarify you as probably a heavy drinker. On page 20 and 21, it breaks this down. There's moderate drinkers, users, which none of us are. There's heavy drinker and users that look a whole lot like the real alcoholic, maybe. Or are you the real alcoholic that has all these three pieces going on? So the real alcoholic, when I put that substance in my body, I develop something called a phenomenon of craving. It's like an allergic reaction that will send me on a spree. Maybe not every single time, but I can't seem to control it. And I prove once again I have no control over it, because I go on a spree, I don't show up to work, I blew the last promise, I'm kicked out of my home, I'm not welcome anywhere, I'm not in my kid's life. I'm talking about my life, just nothing good in my life. And so the truth and consequences keep coming. So what am I to do? I'm beyond human aid to get out of this. I've tried. I've moved several times, got new girlfriends, got a loan, got a car, got a new job, and yet I can't pull things together and muster anything good out of my life. So what am I to do? I am in a situation where I don't even have a choice. I'm so sick in my spirit, in my mind, in my body, that I've lost the ability to choose whether or not I'm going to drink or use again. That's the situation I was in. Very bleak situation. And come to find out that there's a solution that if I follow on a daily basis, and remember, God's in the center of all this solution, but I have to choose to seek God. I have to make myself available, come around like-minded people. I have to be brave enough and have enough courage with God's help to work all the steps and then be willing to live out the steps in all of my affairs, taking no days off, and be willing to take other people through the steps. And there's this promise, this 100% guarantee that I'll never go back on this cycle. Guess what the other 100% guarantee is? If you take days off, if you think you're uniquely different, and you don't have to follow this path on a daily basis, and stay in these 3 parts that we're going to go over that treat the threefold disease, these 3 parts will treat my mind, my body, and my spirit. And if I don't stay on this path and treat those 3 with these 3 simple things, I have a 100% guarantee to go back on the cycle. So there's 200% guarantees I have here. And one of them, if I don't live this spiritual path, I have no choice. So really my only choice is either I'm going to stay on this spiritual path or it's not going to end well. So I ultimately have one choice. The Big Book talks about comparing this to cancer. Like, cancer it's alcoholism is an illness. And there's only one way to treat it. And we found a way to treat it. And it's with God and the things of God. So you're either going to follow this path and treat it, or you'll find yourself back on the cycle. And then we can learn from Bill. Page 13. Top of page 13. Here's Bill's story. Bill's in and out of treatment. In and out of treatment. Things got real bad for Bill, just like for me. He's made all the firm resolutions, all the promises to his wife and everybody else and employers and everybody else. And he just can't quite seem to keep it together. He's had chance after chance after chance. One of the times that he got out of treatment, he thought self-knowledge, understanding, how his brain worked and what to stay away from would be his ticket. And he did good for a couple of months. But until he found out that he'd have to stay on this spiritual path and take no days off is what I finally found out in my life. So let's read this. Bill's story, page 13 at the top. 3rd line. At the hospital, I was separated from alcohol for the last time. Treatment seemed wise, for I showed signs of delirium tremens. So, once again, he's in treatment, but this is going to be for the last time. And, so he needed to get treated. We need to go into treatment, and he actually worked the steps this time. Look at how he explained it. There I humbly offered myself to God, as I then understood him, to do with me as he would. I placed myself unreservedly under his care and direction. I admitted for the first time that of myself I was nothing, that without him I was lost. I ruthlessly faced my sins and became willing to have my newfound friend take them away, root and branch. I have not had a drink since. Well, I did this for the first time in 2012. And someone took me through this book, and I was willing to follow whatever the book said. Of course, I had my Bible right by me, because this big book came from the Bible, biblical principles, but it's a practical way for guys like us to follow and get connected with God and recover from alcoholism and drug addiction. So Bill got the chance to go understand step one, I'm completely powerless to get off this cycle. And why is my life unmanageable? If I stay away from drugs and alcohol, my life doesn't straighten out. Why? Because my life's unmanageable because I have a spiritual malady, which is disconnection from God, that I've only learned to treat with drugs and alcohol. So when I remove the drugs and alcohol, I don't get better, I get worse. So I need God's help to come close with God, because the problem was estrangement from God. So now through these steps, I come close to God and stay close to God and humbly offer myself to God on a daily basis. You see, that's the action on my part and anybody's part. That's your job. You have to do that on a daily basis. And this thing will 100% work. You know how I know? Because I'm walking it out, okay? And I question it and I challenge the people because I'm ignorant. But now I put it into practice. And if I do what I need to do every day, I will continue to stay sober and recovered and walk with God until the end of my days. It's 11 and a half years and counting, and I couldn't go 11 hours. Okay, so I know it works. I had to humbly offer myself to God. Look what else. So he admitted he was powerless. My life's unmanageable because I have a spiritual malady that I can't treat with drugs and alcohol no more. I need to treat it with God in a relationship with God. And that's my only choice I have. If I'm the real alcoholic addict, there's no other way that I'm going to be able to stay off this cycle. And if I keep going on this cycle, I'm going to run out of chances and I'm going to die. Okay? This is a death sentence. Okay? It's like terminal cancer. So, and then he goes, will God, step two, can I dare to believe that God could restore my sanity? How crazy insane was my life when at times I would have the alcohol and drugs out of my body? Why would I ever put it back in? I have the mind of a chronic alcoholic addict. It's insanity. Absolutely insane. You couldn't even explain it. If you tried to use another analogy, they use the stove. None of us would continue to put our hand on a hot stove. Then why would we, in that same manner, keep putting the alcohol and the drugs back in our body? With all the consequences it causes. So can God restore me back to sanity? And then I want to humbly offer myself, step three, to God's will rather than my will. But this is a daily basis. Next paragraph. Look what else he did. Moving into step 4, right? My schoolmate visited me and I fully acquainted him with my problems and deficiencies. That's tough to do, right? It takes courage. We made a list of people I had hurt or towards whom I felt resentment. I expressed my entire willingness to approach these individuals, admitting my wrong. Never was I to be critical of them. I was to right all such matters to the utmost of my ability. There's action on our part. We have to clean up the wreckage of our past. We have to take an inventory of our lives. We have to be willing to be honest with another person and God and see where our character defects are. Because if we don't find out our character defects, we're going to keep going back on this cycle. We'll keep turning back to drugs and alcohol and we'll have nothing good in our life. So we have to go through this process. This isn't as easy as just going to the altar. How many times did I go to the altar? But the Monday morning, I did nothing different. There's action on our part, and it takes courage to step through with some of this stuff. Okay? So I had to be willing to clean up the wreckage of my past. Okay? Back to page 13. I was to test my thinking by the new God conscious within. Common sense would thus become uncommon sense. I was to sit quietly when in doubt, asking only for direction and strength to meet my problems as he would have me. Never was I to pray for myself. What kind of information is this? Wow. You don't hear this in church, do you? I know I don't. Never was I to pray for myself. What a novel concept. It says, except as my requests bore on my usefulness to others. Only if the blessing I was going to get and pray for would be a blessing to someone else and useful to others. You see, we're going to find out here real soon that selfish and self-centeredness is our real problem, and that has to be addressed on a daily basis. You see, Some of this stuff is hard to address a lot of times in different settings, like churches and other things, because we don't really know to come after selfish and self-centeredness. And you can see a lot of that through people's prayer requests. Listen to people's prayer requests and do a little test on your own, and you'll see how selfish and self-centered we can be. Okay? So we have to fight against that on a daily basis. Then only might I expect to receive, but that would be in great measure. My friend promised that when these things were done, I would enter upon a new relationship with my Creator that would have the elements of a way of living which answered all my problems. Belief in the power of God plus enough willingness, honesty, and humility to establish and maintain the new order of things were the essential requirements. The whole point of this, going through this work, taking no days off, is you will enter into a relationship with God. That's the whole point of this. That's what this is all about. Because when you're close, have a close, intimate relationship with God, and you're doing the things that God has called us to do, we start living in the way He designed us to live, all of a sudden, your life is going to drastically change. But if you can't get over yourself and let God's power come in and be willing to do something different and surrender your will on a daily basis, you're going to keep getting the same result you've always got. So everybody can change if they're willing to do their part. Okay? Page 14. Top 14. Here he goes. Ready? Does this all sound simple? Well, let's see what the big book says. Simple but not easy. A price had to be paid. It meant destruction of self-centeredness. Without destruction of our self-centeredness, this isn't going to work. Isn't that amazing, groundbreaking? I didn't know what was wrong with me before. I got this information and I'm finding out what's always been wrong with me. I've always been selfish and self-centered. And, things worked out different times in my life for me. I'd get my way. I'd get the girl. I'd, sneak around, wouldn't get caught for a time. But it did all catch up to me. And I'm thankful for that. So I have to keep on this path that will help me, get rid of my selfish and self-centeredness, or at least beat it down. Okay, it says, I must turn in all things to the Father of light who presides over us all. These were revolutionary and drastic proposals, but the moment I fully accepted them, the effect was electric. There was a sense of victory followed by such a peace and serenity as I had never known. There was utter confidence. I felt lifted up as though the great clean wind of a mountaintop blew through and through. God comes to most men gradually, but his impact on me was sudden and profound. If I can start looking to God and let God start being God in my life, and I'm willing to go through the process of getting my selfish and self-centeredness beaten down every day, and I'm willing to do these steps, I'm willing to show up every day, I'm willing to stay around like-minded people, the effect is electric and powerful. And it may be gradual on some people, as the book's saying. Maybe sudden for some or gradual for some other. But it will happen for each person that's willing to do this work. See, if you've never really followed this book and done the work and stayed after it and didn't let up, then you wouldn't know what it's like. You're either going to choose to do this work or you're not. Okay. So, let's go to the bottom of page 14 where it says, my friend. Okay? It says, my friend had emphasized the absolute necessity of demonstrating these principles in all my affairs. Particularly was it imperative to work with others as he had worked with me. So we just went over going through the steps, which is going to treat our mind. The way we treat this threefold disease is laid out all through this book. We just read on page 13, Bill went through these steps. That's the recovery side. As treating our mind, the best way to treat our mind is working the steps and living the steps out in all of our affairs. Okay? So, since we have a threefold disease that only can be treated this way, we see it laid out in the book. So now we're getting to the spirit piece. The best way to treat our spirits, God set this up this way. God wants us to love God and love others. The best way to treat our spirit is to give back so freely what we were given. Someone took the time to work with us and showed us the spiritual path, and now we need to take time to show other people the spiritual path. And it says how imperative this is to work with others, which is taking other people through the steps. You got to understand that these words are in here for a reason. It says it is imperative, like of all importance, in order for this to work. You got to make time to take people through the steps. Let's see what it says. Faith without works was dead. He said, and how appallingly true for the alcoholic. For if an alcoholic failed to perfect and enlarge his spiritual life, how? Through work and self-sacrifice for others, he could not survive the certain trials and low spots ahead. We can't, the book of James in the Bible talks about faith without works is dead. We can't say, oh, I believe in God. Yeah, I believe in God. But there's no action that backs that up. You know, we prove our love for God by obeying his commandments. You know, genuine faith will produce in good works. And the Holy Spirit is powering that. You know, God is giving us his power for these good works to come in our lives. But you can't just say, oh, I have faith, I believe in God, I love in God, and your life has no evidence of that. That's what it's saying here. There's action on our part, right? And God is in the middle of all this action. That's why I don't miss a day. I can't pull this stuff off on my own power. I have to cooperate with God. I have to connect with his power and let him use my life, and then I have actions that I need to take. Okay? It said it's imperative. What does it say right here? That you will not survive the certain trials in low spots ahead. So life's going to come at you. And if you're not working with somebody else, you're not going to survive the low spots and the trials of life. It said, if he did not work, he would surely drink again. And if he drank, he would surely die. Then faith would be dead indeed. With us, it is just like that. So if you've ever relapsed and you weren't working with another alcoholic addict, don't wonder why you relapsed. Okay? Life happens, life comes, and we wonder sometimes why we relapsed, why we went back. But were we working with other alcoholic addicts? You know? It's a simple path to follow. So, that is the spirit piece. The best way to treat our spirit is to work with other alcoholic addicts, okay? This is not, it's been solved. On page 116 in the big book, it says the age-old riddle of alcoholism and drug addiction has been solved. So nobody should be relapsing anymore. Nobody should be hung up with drugs and alcohol anymore, because we know the path. We know it's been solved. But it's up to the individual to choose this path on a daily basis. The ball's going to be in your court. You have to choose it on a daily basis. Okay. Let's get down to the body piece now. Okay? If you read with me at the bottom of page 15, we're going to see the body piece. It says the third line down from the bottom. In one Western city and its environs, there are 1,000 of us in our families. Look what it says. We meet frequently so that the newcomers may find the fellowship that they seek. At these informal gatherings, one may often see from 50 to 200 persons. We are growing in numbers and in power. So the third thing to do that treats the body is we bring our body around like-minded people, to church, to Bible studies, to AA meetings, to meet our sponsor once a week, meet with our sponsee once a week. So you're talking about a 4 or 5 week commitment that a lot of people brush to the side. But if you brush this stuff to the side, don't wonder why you're back on the cycle. Countless people. And they did okay for a while, probably for a couple months, maybe a year or two. Who knows? But they didn't know how to treat this threefold disease. So we're going to end with the rest of page 16. Okay? And look at the promises, what can happen when we surrender to this spiritual path. We don't take any days off, and we treat our alcoholism and drug addiction with God and the things of God. That's all we're doing. And by doing this spiritual path and staying in these three parks, it keeps us close to God. So, because as soon as we start getting estranged from God, what happens? We get blocked off from the sunlight of the Spirit. Our mind starts messing with us, and we can go down. So, come back with me to page 16. We've been talking for about 30 minutes, and that's about as far as we're ever going to go. So, let's finish up right here. It says, an alcoholic in his cups is an unlovely creature. Our struggles with them are variously strenuous, comic, and tragic. Yeah, unlovely is a nice way of saying it, because that was me. It's pitiful, ignorant, unimaginable. The alcoholic addict, me. I'm talking about me. When I'm stuck on this cycle, the choices I make, it's like unbelievable. The damage and the heartache that I leave behind me, the wreckage. Unloving creature, that's a nice way of putting it. It says, one poor chap committed suicide in my home. Look at the next line. He could not or would not see our way of life. I think there'd be a nice way where they say he could not. Because I'm more leaning towards he would not. You have a choice to make now. If you don't choose to get on this path and stay in the three parts, you will have no choice but to be back on this cycle. So the only choice you have is to follow the spiritual path. He would not or could not see our way of life. Last paragraph. There is, however, a vast amount of fun about it all. Let's bring it back. There's a lot of fun. There's a lot of lightness. There's a lot of joy and peace when you're living this type of life. Man, it says, I suppose some would be shocked at our seeming worldliness and levity, but just underneath there is deadly earnestness, right? We know how to get serious too. Faith has to work how often? 24 hours a day, in and through us, or we perish. It's a daily approach. We got to keep hitting this home. It's a daily approach, or we perish, right? We have to have faith in God, look to Him on a daily basis, and do the other parts that we're talking about. It says this, most of us feel we need look no further for utopia. We have it with us right here and now. Each day, my friend's simple talk in our kitchen multiplies itself in a widening circle of peace on earth and goodwill to men. You can be a part of this too. You can choose to be a part of this, or you'll find out sooner than later that you'll have no choice and you'll be back on this cycle. So the choice is yours. There's a way out, and we can explain it to whoever wants to listen. Okay? We'll see you next week.